Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started in a minute. Just find yourself a seat. Great to see a full house here tonight. It's so awesome. Thank you all for coming. I can see you're very excited about this topic, and we had a little problem to actually seat you all, so we had to go to the bigger venue here. So thank you for noticing the change and coming over. So just some small things first. The restrooms, they're in the back there on the door with the ghosts. So in case you need to go, that's the place to go. We still have some drinks over there, so feel free to grab some to keep you nicely watered during the talk. We have a few intro slides, so let me just go through these first. First thing first, as you can see, we have this whole setup here. Which means we're trying to live stream it. The camera is over there, so you're not being recorded. Don't worry, it's not creepy like that. But we'll be recording this talk, so you can hopefully watch it later. We had some audio problems before, but I can see now it's okay. So let's hope the stream will go smooth. If you have a question, it might not be easy to be recorded, so we might need to repeat it if that happens. The link to the YouTube stream we will post later in the comments, so you can find it there for your later viewing. First of all, thank you also Garage Society for hosting here. As they've always been providing us these nice spaces, so we're really thankful for them for doing that. They also wanted to let you know about some of their upcoming events, as you can see here. And as you can see, these events are really around startups, business, and also our technology events as well. It's really information sharing. If you like this one, you might actually like these other ones as well. The Garage Society is growing quite fast, as you can see, some more new places opening up. And they also have a Garage Academy, which is a new platform which they launched a few months ago, where you can sign up and get connected with other people in the startup community. And it's a great place to connect with other people there. So last but not least, again, the events that are coming up. This is actually the benefits of the Garage Academy, so that, as I said before, you can connect with other people in the community. These were the upcoming events as a reminder. We also want to thank CNR. So Stephen, I'll let you give you the word. Maybe if you hear the mics. So we can report you.
Sorry, just a quick message. So usually Microsoft sponsors like all the drinks and stuff like that, but since today we ran out of funds, so decided to sponsor on behalf of our company, CNR. We're a small boutique local software consultancy. And we're looking for passionate developers. We do a lot of stuff in the .NET stack, mobile, cloud, everything. So if you're interested in looking for new pastures, feel free to go to this link here, and we'll be happy to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for sponsoring the drinks, of course. Also upcoming, we have a next launch event, and if you've seen some of our launch events before, we did one last year for Visual Studio. We have one more this year for Azure DevOps. So this is where we have a couple of people in the community here that will give you talks about how to use Azure DevOps. So definitely come by. We have some swag as well, and of course a lot of things to learn. So definitely check it out. It's already on the meetup page. And then, without any further ado, I want to introduce the next talk by Vinod. He's an architect for, the Play Studio, that's right, and it's a games company, right? Awesome. Okay, well, take the stage, please. Please give a welcome round of applause for Vinod.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you all for joining this session. And I hope next 1 hour we'll have some cool experience with the technology after a busy working day. So just relax for 1 hour and let's experience some of the feature offerings provided by Microsoft and the community. So the way I have come up with the strategy of this talk is this is going to be a completely hands-on session. But I'll have some deck which covers the theoretical. We are not going to deep dive into the theoretical aspect because it's just a coding exercise, hands-on exercise. But to set the context, I would like to touch base some of the theoretical stuffs on this talk. So, okay. So this is what we are going to talk today, tonight, like the ASP.NET Core. This is one of the component which is released in .NET Core, and then Visual Studio 27. Fortunately, the preview 4 has been released last week, and it's not released publicly yet. So, but you can still download and you can use it. So we are going to use preview 4 and Swagger for API documentation, then Microsoft API Analyzer, Entity Core, XUnit API, Code Gen, and HTTP REPL. These are the components which we are going to use in the hands-on coding session, and use the basic features of these components. And later on, when you have time, when you have the real need in the project, you can go and deep dive and experiment and see how these features are going to be useful for you. So in my opinion, the takeaway from this talk is to just get a sense of what offerings from Microsoft and the community is provided in .NET framework, .NET platform, and get to see what are those features. And later on, when you go and do the experiment and play just with them and try to learn more of them. So basically, one thing, though we are using .NET Core as a development platform, but not necessarily that everyone who is experienced with .NET Core will be benefited by this talk. It's pretty much standard things which are still relevant for .NET Framework as well. So if you haven't worked on .NET Core, don't worry. The fundamentals, the concept, the community open sources which we are going to use, those are still relevant with the .NET Framework. Okay, so just a couple of points about the components which we are using. This is the link where you can download Visual Studio 27 Preview 4. The good thing about Preview 4 is that when you download it, it will not overwrite your 2017 version, whatever version you have, community, enterprise, or professional. It is a side-by-side installation, so still you can have your Visual Studio 2017 on your system and another instance of Preview 4, so both instances can run parallel. Then ASP.NET Core 2.2, it's released part of Visual Studio 2017 15.9, which is not released publicly yet. So currently, if you see .NET Core 2.1 have .NET Core 2.1 framework. So 2.2 is not released publicly yet. And I think Microsoft is planning to release early next year, 2017, with .NET Core 2.2. The good thing about .NET Core is that it has full Docker support. So you can Dockerize the application, you can utilize all the containerized feature, and you can host in the Azure or any other cloud offerings which you want with the Docker support. So full Docker support, and it's complete open source. So like earlier versions of Microsoft .NET Framework, it's not like that. It's completely open source, and the open source code is available, and you can download the source code and you can play around. In fact, you can customize it. You can make your own .NET Core platform and solution for your own. The next thing is about .NET Core is package distribution. So it's not like that the whole assembly or the whole framework is installed. It is like whatever you need, you can just use those NuGet packages, and you can utilize only those assemblies, those NuGet packages into your application. So not everything you need to get on your system. So it's pretty much distributed. This is the link. You can download .NET Core Framework 2.2. So if you open this link, you will see there are two sections. One is SDK, another is bundle for runtime. So if you want to develop some applications, you need to download the SDK and install it, and you can develop the application. If you just need for the deployment, for the production, you can go for the runtime version of that. Then we are going to talk about, we will use Swagger. Swagger is one of the, I believe most of you or some of you must have used Swagger before, because Swagger is one of the best API documentation tool. As per my opinion, I'm not saying, I'm not quoting that. There is no better solution available, but Swagger is something I really love. So this is the API documentation tool we are going to use, and Swagger has got the .NET Core support. So they have built a NuGet package which is aligned to .NET Core, which uses .NET Core, and you can use that for the API documentation. Then the good thing, then the next component which we are going to use is Microsoft API Analyzer. This is also not released publicly yet because it is part of Visual Studio 2017 Preview 4. But it is a good NuGet package which gives you hint to manage the HTTP status code. So when we talk about APIs, right, it's just of HTTP, right? So we have to do a lot of coding by our own to manage the HTTP status, but this is the package which helps us to manage the HTTP status it's on. It's a good, cool stuff. And then, of course, we are using Entity Core version 2.2. So just small information about Entity Core 2.2. So in the .NET framework, Microsoft has released Entity Framework 6. After that, they have released Entity Framework.core 2.1, which was built on top of Entity Framework EF6. But now 2.2 is completely different code base. It is completely rewritten. It's not the migration of EF6, but it is a port of EF6, and they have improved a lot. They have done a lot of improvement, and it is really quite stable, Entity Framework Core 2.2. For testing, we will be using XUnit. I'm sure there are a lot of testing tools available, and we must have experience like we started with NUnit, then MS Test, then this is the framework which is introduced by Microsoft. The good thing about XUnit is that it is completely CLI driven. It is completely integrated with CLIs, and the benefit of CLI is that you don't really need a user interface to run the unit test, right? You can batch script, and you can hook up the testing tool, and you can run it, and it's just compatible with the CLI. So XUnit is pretty good in that terms. Then NSwag, yeah, this is also one of the nice open source built from the same team, Swagger team. So you know, when we write APIs, and writing the SDK is one of the pretty much hectic tasks, right? Because as a developer, what we bother about writing the APIs, but if we have to write the SDK also, then it's a pain in the ass, right? Or the consumer has to write the SDK, and where they can go wrong. So this is one of the open source tool which help us to code gen the HTTP client. We don't have to write our own. We can utilize the available support, and our HTTP client is ready. Then HTTP REPL. So this is also one of the Microsoft initiative to introduce the HTTP client for REST APIs. Till now, Microsoft has no REST API client. All the clients which we generally use, you must have used maybe Postman, one of the tool Postman, REST client. There are a couple of clients which we use, maybe for that matter, Fiddler, right? We use these tools to test the APIs, but now Microsoft has its own tool, HTTP REPL, and which we can use, and this is also a CLI integrated tool. I mean, you can invoke that from the command prompt. So we are going to use this tool also. So this is some information about the components, the open source, or the building blocks we are going to use in this demo for today. How does it sound? Cool? Okay, so let's jump into the code. So generally in Microsoft, in any event, when we have a talk, there is one common phrase, show me the code. So if you have seen MVA, Microsoft Virtual Academy, or Channel 9, I watch Scott Hunter, Harris, what you call that guy? I forget that. I mean, generally the terminology or the analogy they use, show me the code. So now let's jump into the code, and let's, whatever we have talked so much so far, let's get it done in the actual way. So okay, now I'm going to switch to my Visual Studio. Okay, so one thing, because .NET Core is pretty much open source, so you can use VS Code or Visual Studio for that matter, or maybe any other editor if you are familiar with or if you are comfortable with. You can use any of the editor and you can compile it through command line also. But for this demo, I'm going to use Visual Studio for my demo. So what we are going to do? Generally, let's take one small sum. See, all the topics which we have covered, individual topic is a vast topic, and if you go in detail of each of the topic, I think we need several talks like this. So what I have done, I have designed, I have come up with an idea where I will be coding a simple sample application where we will be building a database, and we will be hosting APIs on top of that, and we will be generating the HTTP client, and then we will be writing XUnit test cases with a simple, using basic HTTP or GET put post, and we will be using all these features. So it is just a glimpse of these tools or the packages, how we can use them. Okay. Okay. So I have a solution, Visual Studio 2017 Preview 4, and I have a blank solution here. So let me head and go. Window P. Is this something I need to do this? Duplicate?
The Windows key, yeah, duplicate should be good. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Thank you, Bart. Okay, so let's add a new project. So first thing first, let's add a database project here. So I'll call it meetup.db. Oh, I forget to use my keyboard. I'm not very. Meetup.db. So I'm using SQL Server database project and creating this database project. So we will be using entity framework. So there are a couple of ways you can write database. Use entity framework. You can use code first, model first, or database first. For the sake of simplicity, I'm using database first approach. However, the choice still we can use different approaches. So I'm using add table. Okay, so let me call that table as meetup detail. Okay, for the interest of the time, I have this table already created. Let me pick up the code from there instead of I code everything. Okay. Okay, so okay, simple table. We have a table called meetup detail where we have ID, date, topic, and participants counts. Simple table. And okay, so let's build this table, build this project, and let me deploy this. Publish. So I'll use my SQL Server database name meetupdb and publish. Okay. So we can see meetupdb here, and we have one table here. Table meetup detail. So just very simple. Create one table, deploy it, and deploy that table into database, and we have the table ready now. Okay, and this is simple .NET Framework project, database project. Now the next thing is to generate the entities from this project and use the entity core framework. Okay, so here I'm going to use .NET standard project. Okay, so one thing, now we have three versions of .NET, right? And sometimes it's confusing. How do we decide what exactly we need to use? Maybe I'm not, I mean, I'm quite, I'm sure that many of us know, but there are three versions: .NET Framework, .NET Standard, .NET Core. Okay, what should we pick up in what time? So .NET Framework is just legacy, what we have been doing, and we have been working so far. It's a .NET Standard and .NET Core. These are two new frameworks which Microsoft has come up with. .NET Core is the one which we have talked just now. It's a completely open source, cross-platform, distributed, Dockerized, open source. This is .NET Core. Now one thing is .NET Standard. .NET Standard is a standard. It's a specification, and it is common. It is a standard which should be implemented by either .NET Core or .NET Framework. So something which we want to utilize in both. So we may have a situation like some of the services are .NET Core and some of the services are still running on .NET Framework, and we need to develop some components. So one choice is that we need to duplicate the code. It's a good choice, but not the efficient one, right? So we can choose .NET Standard Framework to develop the common component, and there is a pretty good matrix which Microsoft has published that .NET, the mapping between .NET Standard, .NET Core, and .NET Framework. So if you use .NET, one version of .NET Standard, which versions of .NET Core and .NET Framework it is compatible with. Okay, so you can choose which version of .NET Standard Framework you want to use, so that it should suffice your .NET Framework and .NET Core component both. So we are going to, so most of the general practice or the general rule is that any reusable library, no matter it is should be reused in .NET Framework or .NET Core, let's use .NET Standard for the libraries. The hosting applications, the applications which are running, these should be version specific like .NET Framework or .NET Core. Okay, but the library should always be using .NET Standard, because you never know. Today you are targeting .NET Core Framework, tomorrow you may want to use the same library in .NET Framework also. So it's good to use .NET Standard Framework for library. So we are going to use .NET Standard class library, and let's call it meetup.entities. Okay, I'm deleting this, the default class, and because we are about to use entity framework, so let me add the NuGet packages. So we are going to use Microsoft.entityframework.core. Entity framework core. This is the Microsoft.entity. Entity framework. Oh, sorry. Okay. So Microsoft.entity framework core, and it gives us the information about the NuGet package, and it gives the GitHub URL or documentation, and it gives us the dependencies list also. So let's install this package. And one more NuGet package, because we are going to use SQL Server. So we will use this another package, and this SQL Server NuGet package will be used for DI, dependency injection, because .NET from, so one good thing about .NET framework, okay, because we are not focusing on the theoretical part, so whenever I recollect some information, I'll just keep talking about it. So DI is the first class citizen of .NET framework now. So .NET core framework is pretty much work on DI. DI is something, it plays a very big role, and you can inject any of the service in the APIs, and you can access that service at any point of time in any of the control or any part of the code, and just you want to hook it up. So this, so to hook up the SQL Server dependencies, we will be using this NuGet package. So let's install this. Okay, let's build if everything works fine. Okay, cool. So we have the project, we have the NuGet package installed. Now let's generate the model from the database. Okay, so we are going to use scaffold services. So the intention is not to, or to avoid hand coding, right? We can write from hand, but let's utilize the available offerings, available features to get most of the code generated for ourselves. So for that matter, we are going to use the scaffold services so that we can generate the model. For that purpose, let's go to the NuGet package manager, NuGet package manager console. Okay, and there is a scaffold service to generate this. So let me, because when I type, I do some mistake. There is a possibility that. So let me copy that. Okay. I'll tell what exactly it is. Okay. Okay. So scaffold DB contacts. So this is a scaffold service which takes some parameters. One of the parameter is data source. We can give the connection string to this data of the database where our schema is available. So this is pretty much the connection string, and then we have the NuGet package and then output directory. Output directory, this is the folder where we want to create it. So one of the common thing which we miss, like let's select the right project here. Let's say if we have maybe 5-6 projects here, by default let's say we have an API also in this project solution. So by default, if the API is selected here, the entities will be created as part of the API's project, which we do not want, right? We want to make this a shared library. So just take a note of that. You should have the right project here. Then only the entities will be created into that project. Otherwise, you may see where these entities are created. What's that? Scaffold DB contacts. No problem. Huh? Is this the initial S? Install package, and this package, I don't know. This one? Okay. Sorry, install dash package. It's a single word or? Okay. Scaffold, the term scaffold DB context is not recognized as a template. What's the problem? Okay, let me just search for this. I mean, it worked, but .NET at package.NET for implement .NET EFD. Sorry? No, it's a NuGet package manager. It runs from there itself. Why it is not? Just give me a minute. How it worked here? Let me check my entities here. But it may not be available here. Let me just give me some time. Okay, let me figure it out. What's the problem? Scaffold, DB context, data source, SSPI, which one? Sorry? Oh, okay. Code.sql server.
NuGet package install of the tools.
Ah, okay, okay. I think, yeah, I missed that. Tools, okay. Tools. Which one? Sorry. Which? Code.2. This one? Oh, sorry. Ah, I think.
If only we had so many more people debugging or doing code.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I missed this package. Okay. Hopefully, package manager console. Scaffold DB context data concept this is from work output directory. Oh, okay. Okay. Open folder. Let me say this actually if I keep this directory, will it project has an active platform of this, select a different platform and try again. Do we do output directory? Come on, man. Come on, come on. This shouldn't be. Scaffold. Okay, so in the interest of the time, I think something went wrong here. Let me copy this DB contacts and actually it should create. I'm not sure why. Let me give it a last try. Here, tools, NSwag package manager, .console, entities. Okay. So let me do one thing. Let me get the classes from here instead of we spend too much time. I think I'm missing something here. So okay. So what it does, it generates the definition of the table, the equivalent entities for that table, and creates a DB contacts. So this is the DB contacts which is created when we run that package. So it creates a DB contacts and generates the entities. I hope it should work because there was a problem. Let's see how it goes. So we have the build now. So we have the entities and we have the database. Okay. Now the third thing, now let's develop the APIs on top of that. I didn't expect this problem, but sometime when you are doing the demo, some problem bound to happen. When you work several times, you may not feel that problem. Okay. Okay, let's add a new project that is the web API we are going to add here. So .NET Core, we will use, okay, let me use, let's go into the web and we will use, so Microsoft has simplified this now. If you go to web, you can see ASP.NET Core web application and .NET Framework application. There are no many more templates available here. But when you go into the next screen, you will find the options here. But this is pretty much simplified by Microsoft. So meetup.api. Okay. So here you can see there are two drop downs available. This is .NET Core and this is ASP.NET Core 2. I mean, this is a second drop down, and this came because of I have Visual Studio 2017 Preview 4 installed here. So as by mentioning that this is a side-by-side installation, it doesn't overwrite your existing installation. So we can use ASP.NET Core 2.2, and we are going to develop simple API, not the. So just choose the API here, and let's not configure HTTPS, and let's leave the default options as it is. Okay. So this will create a web API project, and in this web API project, we have to reference these entities, because these entities we are going to use. So let's add a dependency as reference, add reference, and let's put entities here. Okay, so we have entities here, and let's build our project. Okay, build. So the default template of ASP.NET Web API, this includes a sample controller. This is the values controller, and this gives pretty much a good template of all the basic HTTP verbs. So we can see here we have HTTP GET, and POST, put and delete, all the common verbs. So we can still extend them, but these are the basic verbs which are provided by the template. So let's see if this solution is working fine. I mean, our project, at least we have the template now. So let's see if this is working fine. The basic stuff. Okay, pretty much value 1 and value 2 are being returned from this default action. So that means it's working now. Okay, now we have a sample controller. So let's generate documentation for this. And then we will add the meetup controller, and then we'll move forward. So with the basic steps, let's generate the documentation, and that's where the Swagger comes into picture. So let's install the Swagger package, and the package name is swashbuckle.asp.core. Swashbuckle.asp.net core. So install the latest version. Okay, by the time it is installing, let's go to the project URL, because Swagger, there are some guidelines to use the Swagger in the code. So when we want to use the Swagger, they have given some of the instructions how we can use Swagger into our API. So we need to add these things here, all these settings which are given to us. So we need to add using this Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core Swagger namespace. And so let's go to our startup, and in startup we have two methods. One is configure services and another is configure. So what we have to do in the configure services, we have to add these lines. This is configure services. So configure services, we can go here and we can use this.
Just a quick question: how does the framework know this configure services? What does it do?
Okay, so there are two methods into this. Okay, so these two methods, one is configure services and one is the configure, and these two methods are used by the .NET Core framework to hook up the middleware. This constructs the HTTP pipeline. So anything which we write here, it gets added into the HTTP pipeline, and when the request comes, this HTTP pipeline builds up, and because of the DI, the HTTP pipeline already knows that, okay, this is the Swagger documentation link which is available, and if we hit that URL, the link activates, this link generates the documentation, Swagger documentation. So these are the two methods which are basically used to build the HTTP pipeline when the HTTP request comes. Okay, so this is for our Swagger. Okay, we need to use the namespace. Okay, let me copy the namespace from there. Okay, info. So this is what we have added into the configure services, and then we have our controller. Then in the configure method, we have to use Swagger. So in the configure method, we have to write use Swagger and this, the JSON endpoint. Okay, so all these settings enable the Swagger documentation for us. So one thing we can do here, like go to the property page here and go to the debug and launch instead of API/values, because this was the default one. We can write the Swagger. This is the endpoint name here. So when we execute this application, we should see the Swagger page. Let me close this first. Cool. So we can see the nice all the bulbs which we have used, those are available for us here. But if we see, we don't see a lot of information here. If we expand this, we can see API/values. This is our get, and we can see HTTP status code 200, right? And there is no parameter because this is default get, and then we have the post, and in the post we have we can see the, like, because this controller just expects string only. So we can try it out and we can pass the body here and then we can execute. So we have got the documentation generated, but we can't see much of the information here, like the HTTP codes and other information. It's not available, but so far so good. Okay, so Swagger exposes the documentation in a particular endpoint, and that endpoint is intercepted in that the NuGet package which we have installed. So it exposes the API documentation, the Swagger endpoints. So that's why when we hit the Swagger endpoint, it generates the documentation. So this endpoint is just for the Swagger, but the actual application endpoints, all the actions which are already available in the controllers, they will have their own endpoints. Okay, cool. So we have got the basic stuff done with the Swagger. Now let's utilize our meetup information which we have built. So let's add one more controller. Controller, then add controller. Okay, so here we'll use the API controller with using entity framework, right? So because we have the entity framework over there, so let's utilize this. Okay, so the model class which we are going to use is meetup detail. This is our model class, and the DB contacts is meetup DB contacts, and let's name the controller as meetup controller itself. Oh, we haven't installed the required run the NSwag. There was an error running the selected code generator. No, DB context. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's not add the entity framework, the controller by the entity framework, because we have already generated the entities. So let's add the normal controller. Yeah. So let's add the API controller with the read-write actions. Okay. So let's give the name to this controller as meetup controller. Okay. Let me check out the API controller, meetup controller. Okay. Let me do one thing again. How do I do this? Okay. I think we are missing the NuGet packages. NuGet packages, ASP.NET Core platform, ASP.NET Core platform abstraction, API designer. Okay, that's one. Other, but here. Controller. Okay. Let me install the entity framework here also. Though I should not, I should require entity framework here because entity framework. But that will be used when I will run the application because dependency injection will take place. But here I should be able to generate the controller using that entities. Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. So I need to, yeah, yeah. Yep. Something we have missed out is this. I need to set the DB contacts here. Okay, startup, set the DB contacts. Okay, I think let's try once again. Add controller, entity framework, meetup detail, DB contacts. Yeah, that's right. Meetup details controller. Thank you. Okay, so we have got our meetup controller, and so pretty much we have got all the HTTP words available here. And let's see now. We have the meetup controller, so let's run this into and see and test it. See the documentation, the Swagger, and test it. How, this what you call all these actions. So pretty much. And one more thing we need to do is that Okay, we have the SQL Server options available. Okay, perfect. I believe we should be good. Okay, we have meetup details and we have the get methods and the post methods. So let's try it out. We shouldn't see anything because we don't have anything into our database. So the body is blank, and let's use the post to create some meetup detail here. If it works fine, let's see. So topic, let's say API development, and let's see participants count 50, execute. We get 201 and ID. This is created, let's see, in our database. Okay, we have the record here. So we have got the entity created over there, and let's see, execute the get, and we get this entity over here. So that means it's working fine. Okay, now let's move to some of the interesting aspects here. See, if you see here, we see just here 200 HTTP code. So we don't see other HTTP code. So we can code by our own, but there is a nice support available from the framework, and we can utilize that support. And for that, I'm going to install one package, and that package called Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.API.Analyzer. Microsoft.core.API Analyzer. No, I might have to. Okay, let me copy the name. Actually, there are so many dots, the big names, so there may be client generation. Okay, this is the NuGet package. Okay, let me try. Oh, yes, it's not released yet, so it will be available in the pre. Okay, so because it's in preview mode, it's still in preview. So okay. Cool. So let's go here, and so this works. I mean, most of the stuff works on the convention. So there is a convention. We can utilize that convention to generate the HTTP status, and to the convention. Okay, instead of I write, let me type it. Okay. Okay. So we can apply an attribute at the assembly level, and the documentation will be available. We can see. So API convention type. This is the type, and the default API convention is the API conventions which Microsoft has given default, and it has all the HTTP codes available. Okay, we can write our own convention, we can extend it, but if we use the default API convention, we will be able to see the nice HTTP code details available in the Swagger documentation. So if we execute it, you should be able to see some more HTTP codes like 401 and some 400 series or 500 series codes. Okay, you can see here code 0, 201, 400, and if you see these, you can see some more codes available, HTTP codes available. So this helps to make your API more understandable to the caller, and they can expect these HTTP codes in different situations. And one more thing, if you notice here, we can see nice model definitions here, This is not because of this analyzer package. Analyzer package just analyze the API and tries to generate the HTTP code for that particular API. But these models and these example values, these are given by the Swagger itself. So we can do, we can play around with this. So this was the pretty much Swagger. Now let's move to the next thing, generation of the client, because we have the API. We have seen that we can utilize Swagger to put some value and create some record and retrieve that record. So let's move forward and let's generate the HTTP client. To generate the HTTP client, there is a nice open source tool, NSwag, or you can say NSwag Studio. You can Google NSwag Studio and you can find a download path, and where from there you can download it. Let me show you if I have the link here. Meetup client. Okay, this is a link, GitHub, and from this link you can download this NSwag Studio and install it, and this studio can be used to generate the client code. And let's see how we can generate the client code. So we have this API running, and let's go and take the JSON file. So okay, let's talk something about this tool first. Okay, this tool can generate the HTTP client, TypeScript client, maybe in C# or C# Web API controller also we can generate. We can generate C# client and TypeScript client. So this is the output side, and the input side we can use Swagger specification. We can provide Swagger specification as an input to generate the client, or we can use the assembly also directly. There are a couple of options available which can be used, which can be utilized, and we can choose the runtime from this drop down. So you can see .NET up to 21. 2.1 is available, 2.2 is not available because it's not released yet. So I hope once 2.2 is released, they will, these guys will generate, they will provide the support for this also. So what you can do, you can copy the URL of the JSON file, okay, JSON specification file, and where we come from this JSON, where we got this file. This is the link we have clicked, and this is the JSON file. Go here, type the URL here, and if you want to create a local copy, so this is the local definition of our information on the APIs. Now let's come to here, we want to generate a C# client, so let's come to C# clients, and there are some settings and then output. So this provides a pretty much nice information, like what namespace we want to give the client to the client class, and these are the namespaces. These are when you open this everything is blank, right? You need to fill it down. So we want to give the namespace as we sorry, this is my something. Let's say meetup.client. This is the namespace. Meetup.client. This is the namespace we want to give, and these are the additional namespaces which we want to utilize. Like for example, if I am using entities generated by the entity framework and that are in different assembly, and when I will generate those entities, my client will utilize those entities, so there should be a assembly reference, the namespace reference. So we can have those namespace references here. Let's see, let's go with the blank first, and then we will have the namespaces here. And then we can see generate, we have some some options here, generate exception classes. So let me say this, I want to say the exception class as meetup exception and generate the client class. Yes, I want to generate the client class, and the class name, I want to name it meetup client. Access modifier is public. Use the base URL for the request, generate the base URL. These are pretty much some of the properties you want to experiment with this. So this has got different varieties, right? Just play it around and see how it works and what satisfies to your need. So for us, these are the default options I will go with. I'll talk about the important properties. This is important property, generate interface for client class. So if you don't select this, this will just generate the client, but if you select this, this will create a nice interface and implement that interface to the client. Okay, and these are some of the data types, how you want to represent the data types, like some values and base class name, generate DTO. You want to generate the data transfer object, generate success response, or okay. So actually the entity, like we have created meetup detail entity. So there are two ways, right? One way is that we can directly expose that meetup detail entity to the client. Another way is that we can have one more definition, API response. Inside that we can have the meetup detail entity. So this will create a meetup API response. This will be a top class. Inside that will be wrapped up, and it will have some more details like a status code and some others. And how we want to some other properties, like how we want to represent the arrays, enumerable. So you can have these settings here, and this is the base URL. So just give the base URL where our client is, our application is running. So this is the base URL. Just put the base URL, and we want to host this on HTTP, and this is directory we don't want to use, and this is where we want to generate the client. Okay, so now, yeah, I want to change it, but let me create the project first here, because I haven't created the .NET, the client project here right now. So let me create a project, and we will have the client placed into that. So let me create a .NET standard, and we'll say meetup.client. CLIENT, meetup.client. Okay, and let me remove this, and this is Control-Shift-B. Okay, this is where I want to generate the meetup client. Let's name the class as meetup client. Okay. So let's see if it is working. So generate output, we have got two options here. One is generate output. This generate output generates the client and shows the code here. Okay. When you see, okay, this is good, you are fine, just generate file. Okay, and if we go here, I believe we should see meetup client here. This client is generated. Let's go here, meetup client. Okay, this is nice client generated. So as I was mentioning that, see, we haven't included these namespaces here, right? So if I use this namespace is available in system.collections.generic. So what you can do, you can use these namespaces here. Okay, and you can provide as many as namespaces here with the help of the comma. So let's see, meetup detail. Meetup detail is not available. We need to add our project reference here. So I can add meetup entity here. And meetup detail is available here in this. Okay. So maybe you can collect all the namespaces here. Okay. and save this file. And next time when you will generate, you don't have to go through all this exercise, and all these details will already be available. So this utilize NewtonSoft JSON. So let's install NewtonSoft.json package, and then we will be done with this client. Client. Oh, I need to manage the NuGet package. NewtonSoft.json. Let's install this. Okay. Let's include the namespaces. Oh, where the problem details comes from?
If you go back to the hint, if you click on the hint again, and then you install package at the bottom.
Oh. Yep. Okay. So client is generated. Let's add one test. Okay. We'll cover HTTP REPL later. So how much time we have? 8:42. 5 minutes. So let's go with the XUnit test cases. Let me generate the XUnit project and test. Okay, XUnit. So meetup.text test. Okay. So in the interest of time, let me copy this from here. Just wanted to just give you some basic test. Okay. So some differences between the MS test and XUnit is that we have got some, both are attribute driven, right? In MS test we have some attributes like test class, test method, but here we have something different, like we have fact, theory. So just some information about that fact. If we have a method which doesn't take any parameter, let's decorate that with the fact attribute. And if we have methods which expect some parameter, or you want to inject some of the information inside that, let's utilize the theory attribute for that and provide the information inside those parameters. The nice thing about that, in the XUnit itself, the test method itself, we can provide the parameter, right? We can declare the parameter, and the .NET framework is smart enough to DI those parameter values to these methods. So, okay, so we have client. Okay, let me see. Client.add. I'm not sure whether we are going to cover all of them. Let's not cover all of them. Okay, so let me try to see. API create post is sync, and then we have meetup detail expected. Okay, and then we have okay. So let me go with the minimum set because we do not have too much time. Okay. So expected, and let's actual null. Where meetup equals await, and this meetup is the value which we have got, and this was the expected. So let me call it actual. Okay. So actual dot await is in task of it. What it is returning? Task of meetup API response. Oh, okay. I need to get the response. Okay. So this is I mean we have chosen API response when we were generating the client. Had I not chosen API response, I would have got directly entity here, but because I have choose API response, so I have to unwrap that entity from the result. So let me say where entity equal to actual dot result, and if I see the entity is the meetup. So let me rename this to let me call this response. Okay, response. Okay. Okay. So I'll be uploading the source code after some time into GitHub so that you can get it and you can experiment with this and you can see it. But currently, because of the limitation of the time, in fact, I cannot run all the test cases, and I cannot show what exactly I have planned, like different test cases, and HTTP REPL is completely left now. But what you can do, you can write the XUnit test cases, like one of the create meetup, where we are creating this meetup, and let me execute this test case. So to execute this test case is pretty much like if you have experienced MS-DOS test, the UI is pretty much similar to that, and you can run this test case from here, where it is failing. Okay, meetup client. So okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Debug test case. Hopefully, ID equal to 1. Do we have ID? Oh, we have ID equal to 1. So let me put ID equal to 2 here, because okay. Okay. The test is passed, and if we see, we should be able to see 2 records here. Okay, so there are, let me open my existing project where I can show you. There are a couple of test cases which I have written, create meetup, and then update entity, and in update entity, in update API, I am utilizing the inline data and theory, the different attribute, and then for delete, I am utilizing the inline data and theory, and then this is the basic test. And now you can go for the advanced test also. Like in the previous test, we have seen that we are passing primitive types. But what if we have the complex type as a parameter if we want to pass? So we can create a complex type, like I have created here I have created meetup test data, and in this meetup test data, I have an array of object, and I'm passing this meetup test data as the input to one of my tests with the attribute class data. Okay. So this is XUnit. Unfortunately, I'm not able to talk too much about it. Otherwise, I will not be able to cover that STP REPL, and that's one of the important cool feature. Let me just touch base on the STP REPL, and then if time permits, then we will go further. Okay, STP REPL. You can download from here, and STP REPL is not available publicly now. It is available in myget repository, so you can download it from there, and you can install this HTTP REPL with this command. Install. Okay, you can run this command on the command prompt. Install to install .NET tool install G, and this is the version, and this is the source. From it will get the HTTP REPL, and then you can verify. So I already have HTTP REPL installed on my machine. So let me open it to just give you a glimpse of that. How? So this is the command prompt. When you install it, it will show like this. You can not only your API, you can test any API REST client. Let's test something from the GitHub. So set base https://API. Let me see if I am typing the URL correct. API.github. GitHub. Okay, github.com. Okay. This should set up the pointer to GitHub. This is pointing to github.com, and you can you can utilize some of the commands which are like dir or ls. So for ls, because we do not GitHub hasn't exposed any of the API publicly, I mean the internal structure. So let's see something here. Let's run the get command. Okay, you can see it is executing the get command from GitHub, and it is getting all the data which is provided to us. Okay, and let me execute get emojis. Okay, so these are all the emojis which GitHub uses. Pretty much. Okay, let's see this last URL. And if we run this URL, so this downloads this picture. So all the emojis are available here. So let's test our API using this HTTP REPL. Okay, so let me close it. Let me open another instance. So set base http :localhost. Okay, let me find out what is the URL of my API. So this is the URL for my API. Sorry, yep. Okay, so let's see ls. What we have here? Oh, sorry, I did it wrong. I missed HTTP. This is the common mistake because when we copy. So set base http : and let me paste it. Yeah. Okay. So it is using Swagger, and let me see ls. What we have here? We have the API because we have the controller API. Let me go to this API, CD API. We have. I'm inside API. Let me see what we have. In this we have meetup details, right? So let me go to meetup details. Okay. If I see ls here, we have get post. Let me run the get command here. We get the nice data from the API. It is hitting the endpoint, and we have created 2 entities over there. So this is getting the entities here. Now let's see how we can. So this is get is simple, right? How we can test the post. So to test the post, we can write post header and header content type application slash JSON. If you hit this okay, a second instance of code is I configured VS Code as my editor, so the instance was running. So nice integration with you can configure any of the editor which you want, and it populates the schema also. So you can have, like, I can have the ID 5 here and date like 2018, let's say 30, let's say 1, topic .NET Core, and let's say, sorry, .NET Core, and let's say participants count, I'll say only 10. Just save it, close it, boom, 400